Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this installment of the Corbell webinar series. Today, we are very pleased to have Cy Holsinger with us from the EGI Foundation, and he's going to present lightweight service management for research infrastructures, the FitSM approach. My name is Vera Mutzer, and I'm involved in the Corbell project on behalf of EMBL EBI, and I'll be hosting the webinar today. I'll also be manning the chat function and question function. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to make you aware that this webinar is being recorded, and that will include the question and answer session at the end. We will make the recording available on the Corbell YouTube channel and our website as well. We have reserved some time at the end of this session for questions and discussion. I would like you to ask you to write your questions in the question function, and we'll go through them at the end. During the webinar, we'll also be asking you about your opinion through a series of polls, and they will flash up on the screen. I'd like to briefly introduce the Corbell project to you. Corbell is a Horizon 2020 funded project bringing together 13 research infrastructures in the biomedical sciences. Corbell aims to transform the understanding of biological mechanisms and help translate them into medical care. Modern biological and biomedical research has become increasingly complex. Often these projects deal with a variety of different technologies, and they tend to operate at the interface between different disciplines. Now, Corbell aims to help these projects by harmonizing access and services for research that involves more than one research infrastructure. So these kind of services could be biological and medical technologies, but also biological samples and data services. So today's presenter is Cy Holsinger. He's currently a Senior Policy and Strategy Officer at the EGI Foundation, working on sustainable planning, business model development, market analysis, and IT service management implementation. Cy studied business communications and management in the US, focusing on project, financial and business management, marketing, and communications. Over the years, he's been involved in several EU-funded projects covering both management and support roles, and he's certified FitSM expert, auditor, and accredited trainer. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Cy.
Yes, can you see my screen okay? So, thank you very much for the introduction and also the opportunity to present FitSM, and for the participants in taking the time to join the webinar and kind of hear of a new approach that, in my experience, as Vera mentioned in the introduction, I've been working in this kind of European funded research and development project space for about 10 years now. And one of the reasons why I really kind of chose to add one of these activities to my day-to-day job is just because I've seen firsthand the value that not only formal service management can provide to organizations that need to deliver and manage services, but really the lightweight approach to FitSM, which kind of matches, my personal pragmatic approach that I take to management. So really today, I want to kind of give you an introduction into what IT service management is, and then kind of provide at least an additional information on what that means also for research. The history and overview to FitSM itself, including some examples of some organizations that are already adopting FitSM. So I think it's kind of nice to hear what some of your colleagues or other areas within inside of research are implementing FitSM. I'll finish off the webinar with the training opportunities, which I think is a really nice formal mechanism to implement to get started with the kind of knowledge and understanding, and then we'll open it up to any discussions or specific questions that you may have. I'm more than happy to stay and answer as many as we have time for. So before we kind of get started here in into the content, I'd kind of like to really understand on what type of audience that we have, and also kind of your current knowledge or experience. So I think through the first poll that we'll open up, which will be basically what type of organization do you represent, just to kind of get a better understanding. So if you want to answer from one of the followings, if you're an individual researcher, if you're representing a research infrastructure or one of the e-infrastructures such as EGI, EUDAT, or something else, if you're a research community, or even if you come from private enterprise or industry. So please answer now. Interesting. Okay, so we have a lot more from the research infrastructures and e-infrastructures, which actually I think is quite fitting, considering that it will be you who will have to plan, manage, deliver, and ultimately improve the services that the individual researchers and the research communities are then going to have to use. So then I hope that then the other representatives can kind of hear about how this kind of implementation will ultimately benefit the way the services are then delivered to you. So I think this is a really interesting group of people. So then the other one that I would like to ask is basically, what is your current knowledge or understanding of approaches such as FitSM or other standards and frameworks that are on the market? So ITIL or ISO 20000, which is the standard on service management, or ISO 27000, which is about information security management, or if you have no understanding of anything on the market, which I think would be even more interesting to know. Oh, wow. Okay. So that means the majority of the participants have zero to no current knowledge or experience with current standards and frameworks. So I think this is even a further excellent opportunity to kind of understand what IT service management is about, and then what FitSM offers. So thank you very much for answering those. That kind of helps me a lot in terms of understanding the information that I'm about to provide. So let me give you a quick introduction to then IT service management. So on a general level, there was a study that was produced by Gartner Research several years ago, which basically concluded that about 80% of all IT service outages originated from people and process issues. In fact, the duration of those outages and the degradations of the services themselves significantly were dependent on non-technical factors. So what is basically the main message from this is it's not really an engineering solution. So you can't kind of engineer your way out of the problem. It's an organizational issue in understanding what were the key activities you have to carry out, and most importantly, the people who then need to carry them out. So then the approach to kind of formalizing IT service management focuses on the customer needs and user expectations, and then defines and establishes and maintains kind of a process model that is very tied to specific roles and responsibilities of individuals. So when we talk about IT service management, it's kind of like a combination between technology, people, and processes that ultimately help us to organize ourselves internally to then deliver a professional service. However, I understand that this is kind of management speak or the general consultant slide, but really there is an additional necessity, or let's say external pressures that are being put on the research community themselves. And I think what we've seen over the last several years, especially moving from European Commission, the Framework 7 program into the Horizon 2020 program, was this kind of shift between not just research publications, but actually services. In fact, there was this term that kept getting, it was almost like the new buzzword, but it was this focus on sustainability. What was really happening with what was being created or developed through public funds, and how that was going to then last beyond the funding. So what that essentially turned us into, which were service providers. So then that's from a funding point of view, but then from a customer point of view, there we've seen also like things like the commoditization of digital services, so like compute and storage services. And then once there was a kind of underlying infrastructure as a service, which was basically becoming a commodity, then we had anything as a service, platforms as a service, software as a services that were being built on top of those that are now kind of commonplace. And this isn't only in the commercial world, this is now from a scientific or research world, that there's this expectation in terms of the services that we are delivering to them have some level of expectation in terms of how that service will be delivered and the quality of said service. And that kind of increases the pressure on the research institutes and these infrastructures that need to deliver these services to now meet these kind of higher expectations from the customers who are using them. And then kind of the final issue is that with the formal training, the majority of research institutes don't have this kind of service provider mentality. So there is this kind of lack of skills in terms of understanding, well, then how do we approach the planning, the delivery, the operation, and the control of these IT services that we're now being expected to deliver. So this kind of brings us back to those kind of three main points, which is having this balance between people and having clear responsibilities, but having the skills to be able to then deliver on them, the awareness of what they're supposed to deliver, having a process-oriented approach in terms of how we manage our service portfolio. What service levels are we promising? Service targets are we promising? How are we dealing with the tickets that are coming in, the changes to the technical services, etc.? But then technology does have its place because it is a mechanism in order to support our IT service delivery. So things like we're going to need a ticketing system, we're going to need documentation, we're going to need templates, etc. So technology does have its place. So then what do we mean by a process? So IT service management is going to repeat this word over and over again. So FitSM does have a vocabulary. It's only 70 terms, so it's not meant to be a dictionary of all things service management, but it gives you a solid list in order to understand the requirements that it's defining. And here it defines process as a set of activities that bring about a specific objective or a set of results. So the three main points around the process is that they support the delivery of service. It provides one IT service to a customer. Often several processes are then needed, and I'll go through the specific process model that FitSM defines. And then an IT service being successfully delivered is a result of many IT services, many processes that are successfully operating and interacting. So what the process model ends up doing is breaking down the silos that tend to form inside of given organizations, that everybody operates in their own given topic in their own given area. But in fact, when you're delivering a professional IT services, you're going to have to interact with a number of different units across the organization. And the process model helps kind of facilitate those interactions. So basically, every single process starts with a goal or an objective. You will need some type of input information in order to carry out your activities. When you're done carrying out your activities, you will have to produce some type of output. And I always say that if you're not producing an output at the end of your activity, you should question the activity that you're carrying out. And every single activity should be assigned to a specific role or individual, similarly to how any of us manage a virtual call or management team. If you're going to define a set of actions, you should always ensure that that specific action has a specific individual tied to it. Here, there's no difference. So then some roles or responsibilities that we can define inside of our service management activities are things like having our service management owner or manager. So somebody who's making sure that all of the information has been documented and they can coordinate the different process activities to make sure that they spot check any issues that happen. When we go through the process model, each individual process will have to have at least an owner or a manager. You will be assigning things like individual incidences that come through the ticketing system, or you'll be defining SLAs with customers. So you'll have a case owner, so a specific SLA owner or a specific incident owner. And then for every single service that you have inside of your service portfolio, you will have to define something like a service owner. And these are some types of typical roles that you will find in formal service management implementation. And then finally, technology. So obviously, I mentioned before that you will need some type of ticketing system. And there's a couple of the e-infrastructures use Gigas, but there's also tools out there like Jira or RT. And for documentation, things like Confluence or Wikimedia. And then templates is a form of technology or tools to support this. So whether or not you use Word documents or Google Apps or whatever that is to help facilitate that. And one of the most common ones you'll see here is, which I have a screenshot of, is like, for an example, having a template for your service level agreements or your service portfolio entry. So then where's FitSM fit into all of this? How did this whole thing start? Well, actually, FitSM dates back to 2012, so it's about 5 years that FitSM has basically was born or established. And this started through a Framework 7, a European Commission funded project, which was called FitSM. And the whole idea of this project was simply to help e-infrastructures increase their professional service delivery. So the types of partners that they had in this project were split into two. There were the consultant partners that were coming from the consulting community of IT service management. And then we had client partners. So EGI, CSC in Finland, and PL Grid in Poland were these kind of initial infrastructures to serve as kind of like the guinea pigs of how could we better organize ourselves from an e-infrastructure point of view. So what ended up happening was there was, in terms of providing us consultancy on how we could better organize ourselves, there was kind of a realization that there was this market gap for a lightweight approach to service management, something that could really scale down something like ITIL or ISO 20000, which can kind of seem a little bit too much or too heavyweight for something that the research and academics really need. So during the course of the project, we ended up formalizing all of the information that they were putting together, and they created and we branded FitSM. So at the end of it, to bring back the buzzword about sustainability, we needed to understand that what would happen after the FitSM project finished. So we branded FitSM, we partnered with a nonprofit organization called ITIL, which is based in Germany, which would host the FitSM license and maintain the standard. So there's a working group that was set up inside of ITMO where we meet together periodically to update and evolve the standard. So FitSM ended in September of 2015. So we're going on 2.5 years since the project finished. We did some negotiation with the certification authority because FitSM offers a personal training and certificate. So if you attend the training courses and pass the exam, then you get a personal certificate. So therefore, we needed a third-party certification authority that could then validate and issue the certificates. And that was initially done with TÜV Süd. And then for any training organization in the future that wanted to deliver FitSM would then need to be accredited and registered with that certification authority. So as of 2017, let's say at the end of 2017, we have up to date awarded over 1,000 personal certificates. And there are currently more than 15 accredited training organizations across Europe that is delivering both formal training as well as consultancy. And we've moved to a new certification authority, which is called ISO Cert. So I'll go into a little bit more detail as this moves on. Regarding adoption, because I think this is the other additional interesting point, I think, for this audience, which is to understand, well, who's doing what, or is FitSM just a commercial product, but actually FitSM is being widely adopted throughout the research and academic world. So on an organizational level, you have, well, obviously CSC has really moved towards implementation beyond their, let's say, initial interest in activities inside of the FitSM project. DKZR, which is a climate change institute in Germany, the EGI Foundation. Obviously, we started with FitSM and we were implementing it over the last several years. And as of last year, EGI has actually moved to an ISO 20000 certificate, which we achieved in December of 2016. And we were able to get that certificate because of the work that we put in having implemented FitSM. EMBO EBI is also implementing. They've done several trainings and they've started with at least one of their pillars inside of the organization. LRZ is a supercomputing organization that has supercomputing in Germany. INFN in Italy has started with one of their national services that they're using as a pilot program. And once they've kind of set up and understood how this all works from a single service point of view, they're going to then expand this to cover all of their national services. And the Surfsara in the Netherlands, they're looking to basically do organizational-wide implementation of FitSM. But then looking at this from a federation point of view, so yes, EGI has done this inside of its nonprofit foundation in the Netherlands, but it's also being applied to basically across the federation. So to include basically almost all service providers, or how all services are being implemented across the federation. For those of you who know the EOSC Hub project, EOSC stands for the European Open Science Cloud, which is a European initiative to set up a kind of open science cloud that would basically allow for different organizations to join and offer services to researchers and allow researchers to then discover services across Europe. The EOSC Hub is going to be a project that is going to start the implementation of this, first starting with a couple e-infrastructures such as EGI and EUDAT. They've used FitSM basically to structure the entire project. So for those of you who are going to be involved in the project, basically when you read all down through the work packages, it uses the FitSM processes to structure the majority of the work packages. EUDAT, the data infrastructure, Helix Nebula, this is a collaboration of large commercial organizations. They're using FitSM basically as a lingua franca. PL Grid, which federates, I think, at least 5 to 7 national institutes and universities in Poland use FitSM, and now even Open Science Grid in the US is starting to use FitSM as its organizational model. This isn't supposed to be an exhaustive list, but I think it starts to give you kind of the scale of the adoption of FitSM inside of the research and academic space. So if any of you are involved in this, you are going to see FitSM repeated throughout. So I think it's a completely applicable approach in this space. So FitSM, it's a standards family. It's basically suitable for any IT providers of any type and any scale. Our main concept was to try to keep it as simple as possible, remove any extra bits that we thought were maybe a higher level of maturity or not really necessary that was covered by something like ITIL or ISO 20000. We've made all of the parts of FitSM freely available under the Creative Commons license. So we basically just ask for attribution, and we have one part which is non-derivative. I'll go through how the Creative Commons parts are applicable to the different parts of FitSM. But for an example, ITIL, you need to pay for the books, or for the ISO certificate, for the ISO, you need to purchase a license in order to access the material. Where for FitSM, we wanted to try to make this as open as possible. So any information that I talk about, you can go to the FitSM website and download the material. We have a sustainable model that's been organized through the ITIMO nonprofit organization, and we do have formal certification, which is backed by a certification authority. So accessibility. So just again, give you some more information about basically the different parts of FitSM and how the licenses are applied. So FitSM 0 is where you can download the terminology and definitions. FitSM 1 is where you get the requirements. So this would be the checklist of things by which you should comply. FitSM 2 offers you a list of potential activities. So if you're being asked to satisfy a given requirement, to give you an understanding of what would be the type of activities that you would have to carry out as an organization to meet those requirements, we give you a suggested list of potential activities. Obviously, those can be used as simply a starting point to see on what you're already doing or what potentially you would need to be put in place. The role model. So I mentioned things like having the service management manager and owner and service owner and process owners and all those kind of roles that you may need to associate to your service management implementation. We have a document that basically outlines all of the suggested or potential responsibilities that comes with being assigned a given role. And then again, just to kind of continue to try to support the implementation so this doesn't stay something that's only on paper, we try to produce as many as possible templates and samples. So if we're asking you to define a service portfolio, what kind of information goes inside of a service portfolio? So we have a service portfolio entry template. If you're being asked to define SLAs with customers, what would be a standard topics that go inside of an SLA? So there's an SLA template. Guides for how to fill those templates in. And then finally, a maturity and capability assessment scheme, which is right now it's Excel based. We hope one day in the future it would be online based, but it's basically an Excel file which asks you a series of questions in terms of how you are currently implementing, or what level of maturity do you think that you are at the moment with regards to the requirements in FitSM 1. This way then you can kind of already see what you're doing well, maybe what should be some of your focused areas, and then you could even update this on a yearly basis, for an example, to then show to management your overall progress towards implementation. So as you can see from a Creative Commons point of view, we only ask, the BY means attribution. So if you're reusing some of the definitions in some document, you basically give a note on where you got it from. If you use one of our templates, basically you say at the bottom of the template that this is based off of FitSM template X. The only ones which is ND, which is non-derivative, which means you can't change it, is on the requirements, because basically we have to have some level of control over FitSM as a standard. So you cannot change the requirements, because then we would have mini versions of FitSM floating around. And then FitSM 6 is also a non-derivative, simply because it's asking you the questions according to the requirements. So it actually doesn't make sense to change it, because we're asking you specifically how you're currently satisfying the requirements in FitSM 1. So here's the process model that I was talking about before. So FitSM covers 15 processes, from service portfolio, service level, your SLAs, service reporting, so managing all of the reports that you're promising in the SLAs, service availability and continuity, capacity, information security, how you are engaging or dealing with both your customers and your suppliers, dealing with things like incidences, doing your problem analysis for trying to understand, well, what's causing a number of these incidences, configuration and change management and release and deployment management, and then having this kind of final overarching process for continual service improvement. So you really can break down these 14 processes into the first 8, which are like more your strategic processes, your planning processes. Whereas these bottom 6 are kind of more your operational level processes. So if you really want to think about, well, out of these 14 processes, well, where would we start? It's actually these first 2. Everything starts from your service portfolio and then your service level management, which is basic the catalog and your SLAs. So that's where most organizations spend the majority of their time, because you need to get this right before you start moving down the stack in terms of defining your other processes. And this isn't sometimes as straightforward as some people think that it is. And these are basically core management processes that any organization in some way, shape, or form need to perform when they've decided that they need to deliver any IT service. So this is just a way to formalize and then organize what needs to be done. So from a logic point of view, FitSM 1 and FitSM 0 and 1, the vocab and requirements basically tell you what you need to achieve. Then the activities and the role models can explain then how do you organize yourself. And then you can move from the templates and guides, which is more about how you then put that in practice. And then finally, you can use FitSM 6 to evaluate how you perform. In fact, you could probably even move FitSM 6 to the beginning to try to understand, well, what are you doing already and what could be your focus areas? So there's like a logical flow to how the FitSM parts are built. So the requirements, there's 85 requirements. It's basically regarded as your proof of effectiveness on what you're doing. It's like a checklist. There's 16 that are basically general across your entire service management practices that kind of look at the overarching issues. And then 69 specific to the processes, those 14 processes I defined before. And I'll show you how this kind of compares to give you a sense of scale compared to the other standards and frameworks. So then what FitSM offers is a kind of a common language and an organizational support. So yes, it does provide you with those 70 key terms. What this allows you to do, especially in federations or collaborative environments, is allows everybody to kind of speak the same language. Everybody understands what you mean whenever you say service portfolio or service catalog. And then the difference of how services are then built, understanding that services is an abstract comment, or it's an abstract concept, which is basically just how you group together a number of different service components that together provide some type of value to the customer. So understanding the difference between a service and then the service components by which that service is built, because service components aren't ever really taken on their own. So whenever you're trying to define your service portfolio internally, it's a really nice mechanism to facilitate discussions in terms of, well, what services are we actually delivering, and what technical component is just providing support to another service. And I mean, it seems like common sense, but you would be surprised on how many times that I've sat down with different organizations to look at their service portfolio, and they've had 30 or 50 services in their service portfolio. But when you really look at them, they're not 30 or 40, they're probably only 5 or 6. It's just that they've had a number of different service components that they were listing as services, and this can become convoluted from a customer point of view, and then also from the internal service provider and how they're organizing themselves. Other things like service portfolio and service catalog, where your service portfolio is your internal list of services that covers things like ones that you're investigating, ones you're planning for, ones that maybe are currently being designed that aren't yet available. The services that are live and can be requested by the customers, as well as services that are retired. Whereas the service catalog is just the public visualization of only the live services that the customers can request, and will probably only be a subset of information that you'll make available, but you'll have much more information about the services internally. So these are two different concepts in terms of what you're managing internally inside of your service portfolio, and then what then gets published into the service catalog, and then how do you manage that process. Other ones like service level agreements versus operational level agreements. And I use this diagram all the time whenever I discuss organizational models with federations or collaborations, and just trying to understand, well, who has the customer relationship responsibilities? Then they're the ones who should be signing the SLAs. Who's on the back end just supplying maybe one of the service components for a given service? Then you need to sign an operational level agreement with that provider who is supporting the end customer. Who are external suppliers who maybe just be offering a specific technology? In there, you need an underpinning agreement, and using these kind of agreement models to be able to better understand your organizational structure. So finally, basically, the compatibility with existing standards and frameworks that are on the market. So where we see FitSM fitting is somewhere in between having little or no formal IT service management to then that full commercial IT service management practices like ITIL or ISO 20000. So we see FitSM fitting in the middle, where it's more achievable, it's more suitable for our organizations. Since it is built from ITIL and ISO 20000 and current standards that are on the market, it's completely compatible. So just like EGI moved from FitSM to the ISO certification, this is the same thing that you can do starting with FitSM. And then if in the future you would like to go for some type of higher level certification, then you could. You wouldn't have to throw away FitSM and completely start from scratch. So FitSM is built from current frameworks and standards. So ISO 9000, which is about quality management, a lot of the general requirements and things about governance structures and management structures are taken from the quality management standard. The majority of FitSM is taken from ISO 20000 and ITIL, which are the service management standards. But FitSM, if you remember from the 14 processes, has a specific process on information security. And that single process in FitSM is taken, it's a scaled down version from ISO 27000. So again, if your organization already has an ISO 27000 certificate, then you can basically insert what you're already doing, and you'd be satisfying pretty much all of the requirements regarding information security. COBIT is a governance and management framework. Takes some inspiration in terms of how FitSM deals with things like top management. And then finally, the software engineering and maturity models for CMMI, and then the related ISO standard, basically the language that FitSM uses in FitSM 6, that self-assessment Excel file, how they use and describe the terms maturity and capability basically comes from an existing standard in terms of how they deal with maturity. So everything that you'll find in FitSM has an existing compatibility, let's say. This is just for completeness. I'm not going to go in through it, but if you would like to read more information from the slides, there's a bit of an overview on each one of these standards and frameworks that I've mentioned. So here's the slide that I basically want to show you the scale that we're talking about. So ITIL is 2,000 pages, over 5 different books. There's lots of good information there. So if there was any concept inside of FitSM that it didn't give you any additional color, ITIL is a great source of information, but there's no real requirements that are listed in there. It's just simply a best practices. ISO 20000, this is the resulting standard. Here you have the 3 core documents of 136 pages. Just the requirements all by themselves is on 26 pages. Where if you look at FitSM, the 4 core documents that include the vocabulary, the requirements, the activities, and the role models is on 38 pages. In just FitSM 1, where you get that checklist of requirements, is on 9 pages. So whenever we say we took a lightweight approach and we've tried to kind of scale this down to the minimum necessary to professionally deliver a service, I think we've kind of hit that balance before you're just not doing anything at all. Here you can basically definitely map all of the different processes somewhere to ISO 20000. What process you won't find in FitSM is around finance and administration. There are some places inside of FitSM where we tell you to take into consideration financial aspects, like in your continuity planning or in information security. But from a lightweight point of view, we didn't find it necessary to have a complete process about it. But everything else completely maps. So finally, this is the last bit, training and certification. So FitSM offers a formal training and certification that is backed by the certification authority, ISO cert. So there's the foundation level, which is basically just 1 day. It gives you an overview of a little bit more in depth than what I'm covering today in the webinar, and then it goes through individually all 14 processes. You have to pass the foundation, but then there's 2 advanced levels, one in service planning and delivery, and that's how we've split those initial 8 processes that are more of your strategic ones. In there, you spend 2 days just going through those 8 processes. It's more of a deep dive into the processes themselves. And then you have another advanced level, which is on those final 8 processes, those more technical operational level processes. And you spend 2 days going through those 6 processes. You don't have to take both of them. You can take just one of them if you wanted to. But if you wanted to take the expert level training, you would need to have both advanced levels. And then this expert bridge is a new thing that we added over the course of FitSM, which was as FitSM kind of penetrated the overall IT service management market, there are a number of current consultants and experts in the field that were delivering training and consultancy, and they wanted to add FitSM to their own service portfolio. So we created a kind of side entry for those professionals because it wasn't really fair to make them start from foundation and work their way through. So for the level, again, just for completeness, I won't go through this in detail, but I'll give you the topics that are covered in the foundation courses, information about the exams. So for an example, it's only 20 multiple choice questions for the foundation. The processes that are covered in the advanced service planning and delivery, the advanced exams have 30 questions, again, just multiple choice. The service operation and control, the different processes that are covered there. And then the expert training, which is basically the higher level that doesn't really cover or go into any more detail about the processes or FitSM, because that's basically stops at the advanced level. But here in the expert level, we go into much more detail about the other standards and frameworks. How do you manage organizational change from a governance point of view? And then it goes into much more detail about implementing and managing the service management in your organization. So at least for your internal service management contact, these kind of courses are interesting for them. So EGI offers training opportunities, which is something that we can kind of gauge your interest and then try to understand how we can kind of organize something for the group. So EGI offers in-house trainings, which is basically a single organization wants to schedule something for a group of people, like let's say roughly 15 people, and then the trainer goes to that organization and delivers a training. EGI at its own office in its own premises basically run open registration ones just for single individuals. So we need to get our training calendar online here soon, but this is just for single individuals that would like to come to Amsterdam and join one of the open ones. And then this is actually something new, which is inside of the EOSC Hub project that I previously mentioned. We added a dedicated task and have allocated some budget to offer some free courses to project members. So at least for this kind of first year, we're going to focus on the foundation level courses, which we're trying to basically co-locate with events or meetings. So for anybody who's attending this webinar is a consortium member, that could also be an additional opportunity. So the website is only like a landing page right now, but we'll try to publish as much information as possible. And then from organizational purposes, if you wanted to see then the overall prices, which are pretty standard from other offers on the market at the moment for both the in-house courses and the open training prices. So I think this pretty much brings me to the end of the webinar, and it allows a little bit of time for discussion. I would just like to open up one last pool before moving into the discussion, which is just trying to gauge your interest in potentially attending a formal training. And then for anybody who answers yes to the pool, to then contact both myself and Vera so that we can kind of gather up where are you coming from, what's your organizational connection, and what could be the most best time and location and funding mechanism to then offer one of these courses. So I'm interested to hear your feedback and your initial interest in attending a formal training. So we open up the pool. Interesting. So it's about 50-50. So we have about 50 people on the call. So that's almost 25 people. So that looks like critical mass to try to have something organized. Maybe even after the discussion or later on when you've had time to reflect. If you ever want more information, then please contact us. Great. So really with that, I'm happy to open the floor to any discussions, or I haven't seen if any questions have come through the pool. So.
Yes, so thank you, Si. We've had a few questions come through from the audience. So two from people that are on the line. One of them is, when should we go for full ITIL? Is FitSM not enough to cover all IT service management?
So in my current opinion and what I've seen, especially in research and academic space, if doing full FitSM implementation would be more than enough. I would say that only a very small fraction of people would decide to go further. Me and Thomas Schaff, who is basically one of the principal authors of FitSM, have had this discussion about, well, what would be the percentage that FitSM covers compared to it, and we basically settled on the number of about 75%. It does satisfy the majority of what's currently on it. We just feel like it takes away a little bit of that extra stuff, which tends to seem like box ticking activities. So, but in my personal opinion, if you implemented all of the requirements of FitSM, that would be way more than enough.
Okay, thank you. An additional question we've got is, do you already have a use case where FitSM was used for non-IT services?
So yeah, so I can basically just tell you from personal experience, and then from the discussions that I've had, is that at EGI for the certification that we have both 9,000 and 20,000 certificates, we include the non-IT services that EGI covers inside of our service management system, because we need to make sure that there are non-IT services are captured in our service portfolio and published in the service catalog. We need to make sure that we have things like terms and conditions and terms of use defined. You will still have things like customer relationship management, etc., and trying to manage customer satisfaction. So there's a lot of, at least the initial processes, like those kind of first handful of processes that are definitely applicable. Now, you definitely won't need things like configuration management and really on a technical level analysis of incidents and stuff. So those kind of processes may be out of scope for your non-IT services, but there's still a number of processes where non-IT services are applicable, and we ourselves include them. And I personally suggest that all organizations include their non-IT services inside of their service management practices.
Okay, so we've got a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Many of the Corbell research infrastructure services are non-IT based, and could FitSM specifically be adapted for those?
So definitely. I mean, what you can do is you can look at the 14 models. So definitely the approach, the concepts, the terminology, and the processes apply. But what you could look at doing is looking at the 14 processes and basically just considering that some of the processes won't be in scope for the different services, and you will only use, let's say, 5 or 6 of the processes for the non-IT services. So, and I'll give you a very concrete example. So me wearing my auditing hat, if I was coming to audit Corbell against its implementation of FitSM, then some of those technical processes would just simply be out of scope for the non-IT services, which is just not a problem. But from a management point of view, they're definitely applicable.
Okay, thank you. And then we've got an additional question. What FitSM level will be provided within EOS Hub project?
So this is a great question. Inside of the project description of action, we have said that we will offer at least one of all levels, but for at least the initial first year, we're probably going to focus on foundation. We just want to make sure that we get as many people trained as possible, considering it is the approach that we're using inside of the project. And then maybe in the second and the third year, we'll then see about moving up and offering the advanced level courses and at least one expert level course. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so we've got a follow-up to that one as well, and it's
Sure.
asking about the certification within the EOS Cup.
So we allocated external budget inside of the project to cover the cost of the certifications. So right now with the project office, we're understanding how far or how much budget is available and what we want to apply that to. And the current decision is that at least the foundation courses, the certifications will also be covered. So the cost of the exams. And then we'll look at basically in the second year, how much budget is remaining, and if we would like to cover the advanced level certifications, or if we're going to ask the individual institutes to, we'll cover the cost of the course, but for the individual certification cost, we would pass that on to the individual institute. But I mean, if you look at the cost of the advanced level exams, that's it's 160, which isn't unreasonable. But I mean, that doesn't mean that that everything won't be covered, but you can rest assured that at least the foundation certificates will be covered by the project.
Okay, we've also got a question about whether FitSM is recommended for private companies, and it says SaaS or SaaS, which I have to admit I don't know what that stands for.
SaaS meaning software as a service companies.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so we have a number of private consultants, mainly based in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and they're doing a lot of their consultancy to small businesses. Obviously, from my point of view, and even with my FitSM working group hat on, it's not that they're so excited to share their client statistics and things like that. But I know that those private consultants are working with small to medium-sized businesses, and then also large institutes. So I can give you one example of a large industry in Germany that basically manages all of the public utilities. Their initial idea was that they were going to implement and go for the certificate of ISO 20000, and it was just becoming too much for them to manage, and they decided to go towards FitSM, which was a more pragmatic approach to how they needed to manage and organize themselves. So it's definitely applicable in small organizations all the way up to large organizations, and I know this is happening at least through our German consultants. But this is just a matter of market spreading. EGI, we're on a European level, and our network of contacts is more in the research and academic space, but we have more than 15 accredited training organizations across Europe that are delivering them also for private companies. So I just don't have the statistics like I have for research.
Okay, we also had a question that was submitted during the registration process. Why do we need a framework like FitSM with the additional workload in an environment that's already chronically short of resources?
Yeah, so this is a common question, because I'm completely sensitive to the fact that everybody already has a full-time job with a full day-to-day task list, and the representation of a new approach or framework and how much that will basically affect people's time. So I'm not naive to say that this will have zero effect on your time management and your and what you're being asked to on a day-to-day basis. But I tend to try to take a very pragmatic approach to this, which is everything that service management and FitSM is asking you to do is probably being done in some way, shape, or another. But from an organizational point of view, it can become very fragmented, and makes it actually more difficult to carry out your job. The other thing then becomes is that there weren't the expectations from a customer point of view, and just kind of having a time to kind of sit down and self-reflect on, are you truly delivering the value that your customers, even if they're individual researchers, are expecting you to deliver? And then as you move forward in the medium to long term, you will have to carry out basically the same activities over and over and over again. So if you can come to some type of process-oriented approach, it should help you then increase the repeatability of different activities, and then actually increase your efficiency. So you should reduce the amount of effort that it takes to deliver the services over the time. So I know it sounds a bit cliche to say, well, what is the cost of not doing it? Are you already at maximum efficiency? Are you already delivering the services of the highest possible value to the customers at the current time? So, but so those are kind of macro benefits that come, but from a pragmatic point of view, is just kind of being able to start from that service portfolio and having that analysis of, have we defined everything the best way? Is those services available? Are they clear? Are they being requested? What is our relationship with the customers, and how are we kind of dealing with all of that? Just kind of ask yourself those basic questions, and then periodically go from there. Take a step-by-step approach instead of coming with this huge wave of new methodology and everybody needs to kind of stop what they're doing and do a complete reorganization of it. I would do definitely more of a spot check and kind of increase things over time. And then this should have also a more of a reduction in the short-term impact as well. So I think there's a couple different strategies that you can deploy to kind of reduce this impact on time, if that makes sense.
So we've got a follow-on to that as well. Are there some studies showing an improvement in some KPIs like customer satisfaction after the introduction of FitSM?
You mean like implementation case studies specifically on the KPIs? There aren't any that I know of at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to wrap it up here because we're at the hour. I'd like to thank Sai very much for today, and what we'll do from a Corbel point of view is follow up on seeing whether we can open up a training opportunity. So please do follow up with myself and Sai. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming as well. What I would like to do is just let you know about the next upcoming webinar, which is on the 27th of February at the same time, and is data sharing and reuse from clinical trials. And we're looking at principles and recommendations, and we've got 3 speakers from Ekrin, Eric.